Hello and welcome to MedPoint Healthcare Center's Stop Waiting program webinar, How to Make Over a Recipe. So an overview of today's presentation, I'm going to be discussing with you why you should consider making over a recipe, as well as 4 main points that you'll want to consider when you're thinking of overhauling a recipe's nutrient quality. Then I'll have you reflect and we will summarize. So why should I make over my recipe? Well, oftentimes people are stumped to figure out what I should make for dinner that's going to be healthy. I need some more recipes, I need some more inspiration. But in this case, you can actually use what you're already familiar with. With a few tweaks, you can make it totally more nutritious, totally more balanced. And it's a great way without having to reinvent the wheel to improve your diet. It's great practice for assessing the nutritional content of a meal, and you get to eat healthier with meals you're already used to eating. It also is a very approachable way to make change. So how do I make over my recipe? Well, there are 4 main points that I'll be discussing with you today. You can make your meal more balanced, filling, nutritious, and delicious to make over your recipe. Balanced. Now this refers to how you distribute or how you fill your plate with your food. So I suggest aiming for at least half of your recipe to be based on vegetables, specifically more so for lunch and dinner, but bonus points if you can do this with breakfast as well. Then you're going to leave the remaining half of your plate, you're going to split that in half once more. 1/4 should be your protein source, and 1/4 should be your carbohydrate source. You want to make your meals more filling. To improve the quality of a recipe, you should consider how satisfying or filling this meal will be. It's not just about the calories, but it's how long that meal is going to last you and sustain you. So look for opportunities to add fiber. And fiber comes from sources like beans, nuts and seeds, complex carbohydrates like vegetables with their skin on, and whole grains. Another way to make recipes more filling is to make sure that you have enough of a protein source in your meal. Some great sources of protein can include beans, nuts and seeds, tofu, tempeh, textured vegetable protein, eggs, Greek yogurt, and of course meat, poultry, and fish. And the third way which you can make your meal more filling is simply to look for opportunities to add more volume without adding a lot of extra calories. And some ways to do this could be, if you're making a soup, add a little more broth. If you are making something like a stew or a sauce, add a little more tomato juice or tomatoes, or just adding more vegetables. Make your recipe more nutritious. Look for ways to improve the nutrient density of your meal. So I'll be going over some key nutrients here. And the first one we'll be discussing is calcium. So calcium plays a major role in bone health, as everyone should know, but it also plays a role in helping our muscles to flex and contract. And some of the main food sources of calcium are milk and milk products, but also fortified milk alternatives like soy, almond, or coconut milk, tahini, which is a common ingredient found in hummus, and one of my favorites, unsung heroes, is canned bone-in fish, where you actually do consume the bones of the salmon or sardines. And believe it or not, navy beans, which is the common bean used in baked beans, as well as molasses, are great sources of calcium as well. And following up the rear with some dark leafy greens or dark green vegetables in general. So the next nutrient we will talk about is magnesium. So magnesium also plays a role in blood pressure regulation as well as bone health. And the main sources of magnesium, pumpkin seeds is at the top. A 1/4 cup of pumpkin seeds a day gets you very close to meeting your magnesium needs. Other sources include things like spinach, other types of nuts as well, edamame, wheat germ, tempeh, and black-eyed peas. The next nutrient we will discuss is potassium. Also plays a very major role in blood pressure regulation. And some of the main sources of potassium are dried apricots, avocado, sweet potato, white potato as well, yogurt, tomatoes, black beans as well, and of course bananas, but I just thought I would share with you a couple different sources of potassium. So the next nutrient we will be talking about and looking at ways to add to your recipe is iron. Now, iron plays a role in our energy levels as it carries the oxygen from our cells to our muscles to different areas of our body. And iron can be found in 2 different forms: heme iron, which is absorbed more efficiently by the body and is found in animal food sources, and non-heme iron, which is found in plant sources and is less well efficiently absorbed by the body. So if you are a flexitarian, you'll want to choose food sources like beef, pork, chicken, fish, eggs. And if you're a vegetarian, you want to fill your plate up with plenty of beans, fortified cereals, and dark green vegetables as well. So I do like to focus on ways to add different foods to improve the nutrient quality of your recipe, but we must also talk about the things that you'll want to scale back on or look to avoid adding to your recipe in extremely high or heavy amounts. So the first to note is added sugar. Now, this is very different from the naturally occurring sugars you may find in things like whole fruit, but added sugars are considered any type of sweetener you are adding into your recipe to add extra sweetness. So these might range from things like honey, maple syrup, table sugar, but those fancy organic expensive added sugars also count, and you still want to watch how much you're using of those as well. Now, sometimes recipes also call for ingredients which are already made up, such as sauces, which may have added sugar in them as well. So be mindful of how much ketchup, barbecue sauce, or even some stir fry or Thai sauces can be very high in added sugar. Sodium is another nutrient which you're going to want to watch how much you have in your recipe. So this would come from sources like table salt, soy sauce, Worcestershire, but also may come and typically come in higher amounts from those pre-made foods which have that extra sodium in them added in already. And this is where most of the added sodium comes from in our diet. We are not typically from the salt we add in cooking ourselves or at the table. So some examples of higher sodium ingredients could be pre-made soup stocks, pre-made soups, canned vegetables or beans, cured smoked meats, cheese, pre-made salad dressings, and olives or pickles. And one of the last ways which you can make over a recipe is by reducing the animal products you're using. So this may seem confusing because I've been pointing out how rich in iron and calcium dairy and red meats and poultry may be, but ultimately we do have too much animal products in our diet as a nation generally. So it's not about completely abolishing. They are still nutritious, but we want to make sure that we are not consuming these in excessive amounts. So one of the simplest ways to cut back is by reducing your portion of these ingredients. Keep an eye out for high glycemic index carbohydrates. So the glycemic index refers to how much that carbohydrate containing food impacts our blood sugar. And foods with a high glycemic index ranking tend to spike our blood sugar higher and result in a quicker dip in energy and blood sugar low, which can tend to cycle us into wanting more of these high glycemic index carbs to bring that blood sugar back up again. So overall, they don't really sustain us, and they're oftentimes stripped of their nutritious fiber and nutrients through processing to make them their fluffy, soft, white versions of themselves. And the last category of foods or ingredients to limit in your recipes is to keep an eye out for less healthy added fats. Specifically, I want you to be wary of high omega-6 oils, corn oil, soybean, sunflower, and cottonseed oil. There's too much omega-6 in our diets already, and when our intake of omega-6 is much higher proportionately to our intake of omega-3, this can be much more pro-inflammatory. And keep an eye out for fats which contain trans fats, specifically things like shortening or hydrogenated oils, which you might find in some margarines, some peanut butters, but they are making their way out of the market. And make your recipes delicious. Add a boost of antioxidants and flavor with fresh or dried herbs and spices. If you're cutting down on sodium and sugar, you don't want to cut the flavor. So try using things like fresh lemon and those fresh and spicy and flavorful herbs and spices as a great substitute. They are also very high in antioxidants generally, so they really help to level up your recipe. Time to reflect. Can you think of a recipe that you make all the time right now, which could really benefit from a makeover? So think about all the things we discussed today. Is there a way you can swap and add in a higher fiber ingredient? Maybe instead of white rice, you choose brown rice. Maybe you can use a low or a no added salt broth for your soup. Or try making your recipe with half the amount of added sugar that it calls for. Or maybe instead of 2 pounds of ground beef for your shepherd's pie, you do 1 pound of ground beef and 2 cups of lentils. The fun and the beauty of cooking is that it's an art form. It's all about experimentation. So in summary, making over a recipe helps you practice applying your nutrition knowledge. It's also a great way to eat healthier with familiarity. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And to make over a recipe, you want to aim to make it more balanced, filling, nutritious, and delicious. Thank you so much for watching.